Hey everybody, movie review next door here, and I'm back with another review. This time I saw Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Oh, let me reset that. This is a horror comedy fantasy film directed by Rachel Talalay from 1991, and it stars Lisa Zane, Sean Greenblatt, Leslie Dean, Brecken Meyer, Yaphet Kotto, Ricky Dean Logan, and Robert Englund. In this film, just when you thought it was safe to sleep, Freddy Krueger returns in the sixth installment of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. As psychologist Maggie Burroughs, tormented by recurring nightmares, meets a patient with the same horrific dreams. Their quest for answers leads to a certain house on Elm Street, where the nightmares become reality. So, what did I think of Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare? Holy fucking shit, dude. Am I glad that this wasn't the final one. Um, I know there's an audience for this film that think that it's underrated or something. I'm not in that, and to be honest, I don't know how anybody could put Dream Child under this. Even with all its issues, I still enjoyed it. This I did not enjoy at all. Um, and yes, again, like most of the others, I have to make this a spoiler review because I want to talk about some really stupid things that this film does. And that possibly maybe like certain people involved with it weren't the right people to choose. But let me get to the cast. Lisa Zane plays Maggie Burroughs. She's a psychologist, and spoiler alert, spoilers. She's the daughter of Freddy Krueger, who was never mentioned until this movie. Just like in the second film when they didn't mention that Nancy kept a diary, and then it just magically poops the fuck out of nowhere. Um, and she's basically got these mental patients. She's trying to like help them survive. Lisa Zane is not good in this film. She is the by far the worst protagonist, as she really doesn't have anything interesting to her. It feels like the fan fiction writing equivalent of like, oh, we have a character that we want to have another connection to Freddy because now his fucking we've done all the things that we can to have creative ways to kill him. So now it's like, oh, we'll make up a daughter. So yeah, I'm not a fan of her. I'm not a fan of her acting. Apparently, she's the sister of Billy Zane, who is an actor that I love. I love Billy Zane and a lot of the things he's in. Um, this this though, I don't know. I just do not like her acting. Sean Greenblatt plays John Doe. He's never given a name, I don't think. Maybe it's I don't know. Um, he's okay. He's one of the last apparently one of the last living Elm Street children, which we never knew until now. Apparent from all we knew, he was. We already saw the last Elm Street child die, which was in the fourth film when Kristen and her friends died. But I guess what the fuck ever now. Um, yeah, he was whatever. Leslie Dean plays Tracy. She was fine. Yaphet Kotto plays Doc. Um, I like Yaphet Kotto ever since Alien, ever since Running Man, um, Thomas Crown Affair. I mean, he wasn't a big part of that. Live and Let Die, great actor. Um, he does a good job here. He's not in a lot though. Breckenmeyer plays Spencer. He's kind of a stoner. That's about all there is to his character. This film has about as stereotypical of characters as you can get. He's whatever. Ricky Dean Logan was fine as Carlos. He's a Hispanic guy who lost his hearing because his mother, like, apparently jammed a big Q-tip in his ear and made him deaf in one ear. Um, but yeah, he was fine. And Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. He was decent. He's one of the best things about this movie. Um, where do I start with the things to talk about with this movie? I guess first I'll talk about Freddy Krueger. Because in the last film, I said there was a bit of a tonal whiplash to things. You'd have a serious talk about, like, oh, maybe we should abort the baby and then it'll stop the dreams, to a very cartoonish nightmare sequence that, like, just the clashing subjects of, like, a character getting over the death of her boyfriend and having to care for a baby on her own and having these dramatic elements like the parents of the boyfriend coming over to try to like take the baby because they think she's crazy. Just stuff that feels like it's from a different movie is amped up to 11 here because I mean everybody who's seen this film knows what I'm talking about. The dream sequences are goofy as fuck, but I'm supposed to like also be sad when these characters die, and pretty much all of the characters that die, I don't have enough of a connection to them. You could say the same for the last film, but at least I knew something about them and they were still likable. These characters, like, they're trying to do kind of a similar thing to the third film with these characters, like, oh, they're mental patients, whatever. They're from a youth outreach center or something, not mental patients. So they're trying to do a similar thing like that where nobody's believing them. And it doesn't work here. Um, so John Doe, Tracy, Spencer, and Carlos are just kind of blank slates of characters. The most you get, the character that you get the most, or characters that you get the most backstory on, are literally, I can tell you really quickly about all of these characters. Um, Spencer, pothead who makes weapons, and his dad wants him to be like him. Carlos, Hispanic guy, has a hearing aid because his mom took his hearing away by shoving a Q-tip in his ear. Tracy was raped by her dad, and she apparently killed him. And John Doe is the character you get the most about. He thinks that he's the last. He thinks that he's Freddy's kid, and that's why Freddy didn't kill him. But the actual reason was because Freddy wanted John to lead him to his daughter, who is Maggie. And I like that shouldn't bother me as much as it does, but it really does because it's like you had a character in the last film that you could have brought back to like really finish out the series. Alice was one of the best characters in the entire series. And probably I definitely like her more than Kristen. I don't know if I like her more than Heather, or excuse me, Nancy, but I love Alice as a character. Now, I am also scared that if they did bring her back, they would have had to, or would have been tempted to kill her off because they don't know what the fuck they're supposed to do with these characters. It's very clear. Um, but just I don't know, just something about this movie, just basically forgetting everything from the past film. Characters somehow knowing that they can enter other people's dreams without ever having a bit to establish that in this film because none of these characters are related to anybody from the last films other than Maggie in a very superficial way where she's a made up daughter of Freddy Krueger. Um like there's literally a bit where Spencer's in the dream, he's being maneuvered like he's in a fucking video game cuz he's a pothead. By Freddy with his fucking power glove, which is so fucking like I can understand why people hate that. Um, and John is like, "Oh, you've got to knock me out. I can get into his dream." Even though we've never seen this before. He has no way of knowing this. Tracy believes him automatically. She hits the fuck out of him. She meditates and they're in the dream. And just this film is a fucking mess. It's even more of a mess than the last film. And a, again, a big part of that might be the choice of director because Rachel Talalay before this film had directed well, I don't even know if she directed anything before this. But like she was a producer for a lot of the films or a line producer, and I don't think is that great directing here because everything looks very flat, everything looks so cartoony, and I know the last film had a bit of humor to it that also didn't fit, but this film doubles down on that and it just does not work. And it really messes up what could have been a cool story. Um, I have to talk about the nightmare sequences. The nightmare sequences we have here are pretty piss poor. Um, Especially given that this might be the most the highest budgeted film in the series. I don't know. Apparently, this had a 9 to $11 million budget, which is more than any of them thus far. That's what Wikipedia says. IMDb says 6 million. I don't fucking know. Um, Even then, it it looks cheap. None of the sets here really give off the production value that the last films had, especially the last film, which had some really cool looking sets that, while not shot the best at times, were still impressive and still gave a sense of scale. This film feels like the production value of what the first one would have been, and the first one was made for $1 million, which is not what you want. It feels very restrictive. It feels like they took steps back in the wrong way, and just the the like most of the nightmare sequences are shit. Like, Carlos is transported back to a fucking like apartment building. His mom like shoves a Q-tip in his ear, and then Freddy like gives him a hearing aid that's actually a leech, and the more it hears, the bigger it gets, and his head explodes. That's about the best part of the entire movie. Um, Spencer is played like a video game and falls into a hole. Uh, Fucking John Doe falls from the sky. He flies out of the back seat of the fucking car that they're in, defying all spatial logic from the last films. Falls down onto an imaginary bed of spikes. Uh, and even the worst one is when Tracy falls asleep and a specter of her dad who raped her comes up, who's played by Peter Spellos, who's a character actor that I was like, oh, that's interesting. He's in this. Um, he was also in The Guyver. He was the kind of like chunky guy that was one of the Zoonoids. And he's like, he's saying all this shit, and this should be just like a dramatic scene that's fucked up to watch. And then it turns into Freddy like fighting her, and it just doesn't work. If you're not gonna have serious Freddy from like the first or second films, first, second, or third films even, then don't do this like really tough subject matter. I'm not mad that the rape thing is there. It's more so the context of it. It just it just doesn't work. And I think that's a big part of this movie's issues is the tone. Tone can completely derail an entire movie, and this film does not have a good tone. It doesn't know if it wants to be a horror movie or a comedy. And it's definitely not a fucking horror comedy because it's not funny. And nothing here that I saw was really that creepy. Um, Also, the acting from pretty much everybody ain't that great. Yaphet Kotto is about the best you get. Um, it it like the nightmares. Again, the nightmares are what you go to these movies for primarily, like an O-rate plot, but the nightmares being fantastical and creepy and having a cool kill. None of the kills here are really that remarkable. It's Carlos's head explodes, cool. Video game kid disappears down a hole because he's bouncing everywhere like a fucking Looney Tunes cartoon, and there's Looney Tunes sound effects. I'm not even joking. And Lisa Zane is sped up like reacting to it, and it just I hate that. It just doesn't fit with anything, and it just makes me so mad. Like that you go from Dream Child, which again I will say is not one of the best in the series, it's one of the lesser ones for me, to this, where it doesn't feel like anybody in production gave a fuck about the other films. There's no continuity to the other films. The only mention of anything in the other films is I don't even think they mention Nancy in the film, which is very weird because that's when all of this shit started was with Nancy. They don't mention Nancy, they don't mention Kristen, they don't mention Alice. So this just feels like a fan film. It feels like a parody and a bad parody because it's not even entertaining to me. You have an interesting idea for creepy horror with the town that doesn't have any, with Springfield, I think, not having any children, so the people are pretending to be children themselves, and they're in the schools, they basically gone mad, they're talking to phantom children that aren't there. That could be creepy, but you're also you have like an A and B plot happening at the same time. You have the like other like uh crazy kids like in the house just basically having all this shit happen while they're in the house because we need the house again. And then you have this B plot where John Doe and Maggie are in like all these buildings trying to find out shit about Kruger, and it just doesn't work. Like they needed to focus on one of these and not like jumble all the shit together because the house stuff makes it feel like that's their shoved in Nightmare on Elm Street material, and the A plot sounded a lot more interesting. Like they could have gone a more psychological direction with this, and it just feels like they shit it all away because the more interesting thing doesn't happen. So it's just and you have like all these random fucking cameos. Like you have Roseanne Barr. I love Roseanne. And Tom Arnold, because this was back when they were together, as this crazy couple. You have uh uh you have Robert Shea, the producer of the films, I think, Rob Shea, as like a bus ticket guy. He's been in quite a few of the films as random cameos. He's in the second film, he's in the first film, I think. He's in the fourth film as a teacher. But you have Johnny Depp doing a Your Brain on Drugs PSA, which I guess that was kind of cool to see him, but it's just too little too late, and this doesn't feel like a celebration of the series because again, this was supposed to be the final one, and it was for quite a few years, 3 years to be exact. So yeah, I'm very disappointed in this. I did not care for this film really that much at all. Um, Freddy is a fucking like meme at this point, to the point where he's not scary. He doesn't do anything creepy. He makes a bunch of one-liners and that's about it. And that's not even what he really like. The one-liners in the third film and the fourth film were at least like entertaining, and these are just like he's constantly laughing and saying really stupid shit, and it just gets on my fucking nerves, and I really don't want to talk about this movie anymore. The main thing I can say is that the film looks all right. Even though it does look a bit cheap in areas, there's some interesting ideas here, definitely, but overall, I think it's disrespectful to the entire franchise, and it is easily the worst so far. But yeah, that was my review of Nightmare on Elm, or excuse me, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. If you've seen the film, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. If you have any recommendations, put them down there as well. And movie reviewer next door, out.